Rich, lonely cowboy seeks housekeeper, finds Cowgirl, sleeping in his barn beside her horse. The wide ranch stretched out under the soft light of early morning. Fences ran across the land like thin lines drawn on a giant map, and the grass moved gently in the breeze. The cowboy stood on the wooden porch of his large house and looked across the fields he had worked so hard to build. People in town often said he was rich. They talked about how much land he owned, how many horses he had, and how his cattle were some of the best in the area. But as he stood there with a cup of coffee in his hand, none of that made him feel full inside. The house behind him was big and quiet. Too quiet. The sound of his footsteps echoed when he walked through the halls. The dining table could seat many people, but most days, only one chair was used. At night, the wind moved through the trees outside, and the empty room seemed to sigh along with it. He had worked for years to make this place strong and successful, but he had not worked as hard to fill it with life. His day usually started before the sun rose. He checked on the cattle, made sure the water pumps were working, and walked the fence lines to see if anything needed fixing. He liked the work because it kept his hands busy and his mind calm. But when the work was done, there was nothing waiting for him except silence. No one to talk to over dinner. No one to laugh with when something went wrong. Just him and the land. One afternoon, after a long day of riding across the fields, he stopped by the small town nearby. The town was simple, with one main street, a few shops, and a place where people gathered to share news. He went into the general store to buy some supplies. As he stood near the counter, he noticed a small board on the wall where people posted notes. Some were about lost dogs, some about selling tools, and some about looking for work. He stared at the board for a moment, then pulled out a small piece of paper from his pocket. He had written a few simple words on it earlier that day. His hand paused as he held the paper, unsure if he should go through with it. But then he thought about the empty house and the long evenings. He walked up to the board and pinned the paper in place. It said he was looking for a housekeeper to help keep the ranch house in order. Someone who could help with meals and simple tasks. He didn't write much more. He didn't want to sound desperate, even though part of him felt that way. He stepped back, looked at the note, and then left the store. The next morning, he woke up earlier than usual. The sky was still dark, and the stars were slowly fading as the first light appeared on the horizon. He put on his boots, grabbed his hat, and headed toward the barn. The horses always needed checking, and he liked the quiet of that time of day. As he got closer, he noticed something strange. The barn door was slightly open. He was sure he had closed it the night before. He moved carefully, his hand resting near the side of his belt, just in case. He pushed the door open and looked inside. That was when he saw her. A young cowgirl lay on the hay near one of the stalls. Her hat was pulled down over her eyes, and her jacket was folded under her head like a pillow. Beside her stood a tired-looking horse, its head low, as if it had traveled a long way. The horse's saddle was still on, and a small bag hung from its side. For a moment, the cowboy just stood there, not sure what to do. He had never had someone just show up in his barn before. He cleared his throat softly, but the cowgirl didn't move. She looked completely worn out. He walked closer and spoke in a calm voice. "Hey," he said. "You okay?" The cowgirl slowly lifted her head. Her eyes blinked a few times as she tried to wake up. She sat up quickly when she realized where she was and who was standing in front of her. "I'm sorry," she said right away. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I just needed a place to rest. My horse and I have been on the road all night." Her voice was tired, but there was strength in it too. The cowboy looked at the horse and then back at her. He could see the dust on her boots and the wear on her clothes. She didn't look like someone trying to cause problems. She looked like someone who had been going for a long time without stopping. He took a breath and relaxed his stance. "You're not in trouble," he said. "You look like you could use some water." He walked to the water pump inside the barn and filled a bucket. He brought it to the horse first. The horse drank eagerly, and the cowgirl watched with relief in her eyes. "Thank you," she said. He nodded and then handed her a small canteen from a shelf. "Here, you should drink too." She took it, hesitated for a moment, and then drank slowly. When she handed it back, she wiped her mouth with her sleeve. "I didn't mean to just come in," she said again. "I saw the barn and thought I could rest for a few hours. I've been riding from ranch to ranch, looking for work." The cowboy leaned against a wooden post and listened. He wasn't used to having someone talk in his barn. It felt strange, but not in a bad way. "What kind of work?" he asked. "Anything I can do," she replied. "Helping with horses, cleaning, cooking, fixing fences. I'm not picky." Her words caught his attention. He thought about the note he had pinned up in town, the one looking for a housekeeper. He looked at her again, really looked this time. She didn't look weak. She looked tired, but capable. "I actually put up a note in town yesterday," he said, "looking for someone to help around the house and the ranch." Her eyes widened slightly. "You did?" He nodded. "Yeah, this place is a lot for one person." She stood up slowly, brushing hay off her jacket. "I don't want to push," she said, "but if you need help, I could stay for a bit." "Just until I find my next place." The cowboy thought about it. He thought about the quiet house. He thought about the long days and empty nights. This stranger had shown up in his barn, and now she was offering to help. "Let's start with breakfast," he said. "You both look like you haven't eaten in a while." Her face softened into a small smile. "That would be nice," she said. They walked out of the barn together. The sun was rising now, painting the sky in soft colors. The cowgirl led her horse to a nearby fence and tied it there. The horse seemed calmer, like it knew it was safe for a while. Inside the house, the cowgirl looked around quietly. She didn't say anything, but the cowboy could tell she was taking it all in. The wide rooms, the clean floors, the simple furniture. It was a nice place, but it didn't feel warm yet. He went into the kitchen and started a small fire on the stove. He pulled out some bread and eggs. The cowgirl stood nearby, unsure if she should help. "You can sit," he said. She shook her head. "I can help," she replied and reached for a pan. They worked side by side without saying much at first. The sound of the pan, the crack of eggs, and the smell of food filled the room. It felt different, lighter. As they ate, the cowboy asked her where she was from. She gave a simple answer, not naming any place, just saying she had been on the road for a long time. He didn't push for more. He told her about the ranch and how he had built it up over the years. The cowgirl listened closely. She asked questions. She seemed truly interested, not just being polite. After breakfast, he showed her around the ranch, the fields, the fences, the horses, and the cattle. She walked with confidence, pointing out small things he hadn't even noticed, like a loose board on a fence and a water trough that needed cleaning. "You know your way around," he said. She smiled. "I've had to." By the time the sun was high, the cowboy realized something had changed. The ranch didn't feel as quiet as it did the day before. There was someone else there now. Someone who brought movement, sound, and a different kind of energy. As they stood near the barn again, the cowgirl looked out across the land. "I can stay for a while," she said, "if you still need the help." He nodded. "I do." Neither of them knew what this choice would lead to. They only knew that, for the first time in a long while, the ranch didn't feel empty. It felt like the start of something new. The next morning began with the soft sound of birds outside the ranch house. Sunlight slipped through the curtains and spread across the wooden floor. The cowboy was already awake, sitting at the small table in the kitchen with a cup of coffee. He listened to the quiet, but it did not feel as empty as before. There was a new sound in the house now, light footsteps moving in the other room. The cowgirl stepped into the kitchen, tying her jacket around her waist. "Morning," she said, her voice still a little sleepy. "Morning," he replied, looking up with a small nod. She glanced at the stove. "Want me to make breakfast?" He paused for a moment, then smiled. That would be good. She moved around the kitchen with ease, like she had been there longer than just one night. She found the bread, cracked a few eggs, and set a pan on the stove. The simple sounds filled the space again. The cowboy watched her for a moment, noticing how comfortable she seemed, even in a place that was not her own. As they ate, the cowgirl told him about the ranch she had worked at before. The owner had sold the land and moved away, leaving her to find her next job. She didn't sound bitter. She spoke about it like it was just another turn in the road. "Seems like you've been moving a lot," he said. She nodded. "I don't stay in one place for too long. You learn not to get too attached." He thought about that. He had stayed in one place his whole life, building it piece by piece. Yet, he still felt alone sometimes. They were different in that way, but maybe that was why they understood each other more than they expected. After breakfast, they headed outside to start the day's work. The sky was clear, and the air was cool. The cowboy handed her a pair of gloves and pointed toward a fence line in the distance. "Some of those boards need fixing," he said. She looked where he pointed and nodded. "Let's take a look." They walked side by side across the field. The grass brushed against their boots, and the wind carried the smell of earth and hay. When they reached the fence, she ran her hand along the wood, testing its strength. "This one's loose," she said, tapping a board. "We can fix it with a new nail." The cowboy handed her the tools and they worked together. It was simple work, but it felt easier with two people. They talked while they worked, sharing small stories. He told her about the first horse he ever owned. She laughed and told him about the time she had fallen into a muddy stream while trying to help a scared animal. Their laughter carried across the field, light and real. It surprised the cowboy. He couldn't remember the last time he had laughed like that. Later in the day, they went into town to pick up a few supplies. The cowgirl tied her horse near the front of the general store. People in town noticed her right away. A few whispered to each other, curious about who she was and why she was with the rich cowboy from the big ranch. Inside the store, the owner greeted the cowboy like an old friend. Then his eyes moved to the cowgirl. "Didn't know you had company these days," the owner said with a small grin. The cowboy felt a strange warmth in his chest. "She's helping out on the ranch," he replied. The cowgirl smiled politely and nodded. She stayed close to the cowboy as they picked up what they needed. He noticed it, but he didn't say anything. As they walked back outside, a man standing near the door looked at the cowgirl and frowned. He took a step forward. "Didn't expect to see you here," the man said. The cowgirl froze for a second. Her smile faded. "I'm just passing through," she replied. The cowboy could feel the tension in the air. "Is there a problem?" he asked. The man shook his head. "No problem, just surprised." He walked away, but the cowgirl stayed quiet the rest of the ride back to the ranch. The cowboy wanted to ask her about it, but he could tell she wasn't ready to talk. Back at the ranch, the day continued with more work. They cleaned the barn, fed the animals, and checked the water troughs. The cowgirl worked hard, never slowing down, even when the sun was high in the sky. At one point, the cowboy offered her a break. She sat on a wooden post near the barn, wiping her face with her sleeve. "You don't have to push yourself so hard," he said. She shrugged.
It's how I stay busy. Keeps my mind quiet.
He understood that feeling. He had used work the same way for years. As the afternoon turned into evening, the sky began to change colors. The cowgirl stood near the fence, watching the sun dip low. The cowboy walked up beside her. "Beautiful," she said softly. "Yeah," he agreed. They stood there for a moment, not talking. The silence felt comfortable, not heavy. Later, inside the house, the cowgirl cooked dinner. The cowboy set the table. It felt like a small thing, but it meant something to both of them. When they sat down to eat, the cowboy realized he was no longer sitting alone at the long table.
After dinner, they sat on the porch.
The stars began to appear one by one in the darkening sky. The cowgirl leaned back in her chair and looked up. "I don't usually stay this long in one place," she said. He looked at her. "Why is that?" She took a breath. "Sometimes it's easier to leave before things get complicated." He nodded slowly. "I get that." They shared a quiet moment. The wind moved through the trees, and the sound of crickets filled the air. The next day brought a new challenge. One of the horses had wandered away from the main field. The cowboy noticed the open gate early in the morning. "Looks like we've got a runner," he said. The cowgirl grabbed her hat. "Let's go find it." They rode out together, following tracks across the land. The sun was just rising, and the air was cool. They rode for a while before spotting the horse near a small stream. The cowgirl moved slowly, speaking in a calm voice. The horse lifted its head, ears flicking back and forth. She held out her hand and waited. After a moment, the horse stepped closer. "Easy," she whispered. The cowboy watched, impressed. She led the horse back without any trouble. "You've got away with them," he said. She smiled. "You listen first. That's the trick." When they returned to the ranch, the cowboy felt a growing respect for her. She wasn't just someone who needed a place to stay. She was someone who brought something real to his life. That evening, as they finished the day's work, the cowboy noticed the same man from town standing near the road by the ranch gate. The cowgirl saw him too. Her shoulders stiffened. The man called out, "We need to talk." The cowboy stepped forward. "About what?" The man looked at the cowgirl. "About her." The cowgirl took a deep breath. "It's okay," she said to the cowboy. "I'll handle this." She walked toward the man. They spoke quietly, too far away for the cowboy to hear. He watched them, feeling uneasy. After a few minutes, the man turned and walked away. The cowgirl came back, her face calm but tired. "You don't have to explain," the cowboy said. She shook her head. "I will, just not tonight." They went back inside. The mood was quieter now. The cowboy could feel that she was carrying something heavy, something from her past. As he lay in bed that night, he stared at the ceiling. He thought about how quickly things had changed. A stranger had walked into his barn, and now she was part of his days. He didn't know what the future would bring, but he knew one thing. The ranch no longer felt like just a place he worked. It felt like a place where something was beginning to grow. The morning air felt cooler than usual. A thin layer of mist rested over the fields, and the grass was wet with dew. The cowboy stepped out onto the porch and took a deep breath. He could hear movement in the barn, the soft sound of a horse shifting its weight, and the quiet steps of boots on the wooden floor. The cowgirl was already awake. He walked toward the barn and found her brushing down one of the horses. The animal stood calm, eyes half closed, enjoying the slow and steady motion of her hand. "Morning," he said. She looked up and smiled. "Morning. Thought I'd get a head start." He leaned against the stall door and watched for a moment. There was something peaceful about the way she worked. She didn't rush. She didn't force. She just stayed patient and gentle. "Looks like you've made yourself at home," he said. She laughed softly. "Just trying to earn my keep." They spent the next few hours working side by side. The fence near the far field needed more repairs, and a water pipe near the barn had started to leak. They fixed it together, passing tools back and forth, speaking in short, easy sentences. The work felt lighter when shared. As the sun climbed higher, they took a break near a large tree at the edge of the field. The cowboy handed her a small bottle of water. "Thanks," she said, taking a long drink. They sat in the shade, looking out at the land. From there they could see the wide stretch of grass, the slow-moving cattle, and the distant hills that marked the edge of the ranch. "Do you ever think about leaving?" she asked. He was surprised by the question. "Leaving this place?" She nodded. He thought for a moment. "I've spent my whole life building this. It's hard to imagine being anywhere else." She looked down at the ground. "I've spent my whole life moving. It's hard to imagine staying." They both went quiet after that. The wind moved through the leaves above them, and a bird flew past, its shadow passing over the grass. Later that day, they went into town again to pick up some feed for the animals. The cowboy noticed how people looked at them now, not just curious, but interested. A few nodded in greeting, a few whispered. Inside the store, the owner smiled.
"Looks like you've got a partner these days," he said.
The cowboy felt that same warm feeling in his chest again. He didn't correct the man. As they were loading the supplies onto the wagon outside, a woman from town walked over. She looked at the cowgirl with a kind but careful expression. "Are you staying out at his ranch?" the woman asked. The cowgirl nodded. "For now." The woman smiled. "It's a good place. Quiet, safe." The cowgirl thanked her, and the woman walked away. The cowboy could see the cowgirl thinking about the word safe. On the ride back, the cowgirl finally spoke about the man who had come to the gate the night before. "He used to work at one of the ranches I stayed at," she said. "We didn't get along.
He thought I took something that wasn't mine." The cowboy frowned.
"Did you?" She shook her head. "No, but once someone decides what they think about you, it's hard to change their mind."
He understood that more than he wanted to admit.
When they got back to the ranch, the sky was starting to darken. Clouds rolled in from the west, heavy and gray. "Looks like we might get a storm," the cowboy said. They worked quickly, making sure the animals were safe and the barn doors were secure. The wind picked up, and the air felt charged. By the time the first drops of rain fell, they were both inside the house. Thunder rumbled in the distance. The cowgirl stood near the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. "I like storms," she said. "They make everything feel new after." The cowboy poured 2 cups of warm tea and handed one to her. "I like the quiet after they pass." They sat at the table listening to the rain hit the roof. The sound filled the space, wrapping around them like a blanket. After a while, the cowgirl spoke again. "You ever feel like this place is too big for just one person?" He looked at her, surprised. "I felt that way for a long time." She nodded. "I can tell." The storm lasted into the night. When it finally eased, the air outside felt fresh and clean. The cowboy stepped out onto the porch. The sky was clear again, and the stars shone bright. The cowgirl joined him. They stood side by side, looking up. "Thanks for letting me stay," she said quietly. He turned to her. "I'm glad you're here." The next few days passed smoothly. They settled into a rhythm. Wake up early, work through the morning, take a break in the shade, finish up in the evening. The house stayed clean. The animals stayed fed. The land felt cared for. But there was something else growing too, a feeling neither of them talked about. One afternoon, the cowboy rode out to check a far fence line. The cowgirl stayed behind to tend to the horses. As he worked, he kept thinking about her. The way she laughed, the way she listened, the way the ranch felt different now. When he returned, he saw her standing near the barn, talking to a small group of people from town. They were smiling, asking her questions. She answered easily, her hands moving as she spoke. He realized then that she wasn't just becoming part of his ranch. She was becoming part of the town, too. That night, after everyone had gone, they sat on the porch again. "You're getting popular," he said. She laughed. "I guess I'm not as good at staying invisible as I thought."
He hesitated, then asked, "Does that make you want to leave?"
She looked at him, really looked this time. "It makes me think about staying." His heart beat a little faster, but he kept his voice calm. "Staying how long?" She smiled softly. "I don't know. Longer than I planned." The next morning they found fresh tracks near the edge of the ranch. Someone had been riding along the fence late at night. The cowboy felt a familiar sense of worry. "Might be someone passing through," he said. The cowgirl studied the tracks. Or someone looking. They didn't say more, but the mood shifted. The land felt a little less open, a little less easy. That afternoon, the same man from town appeared again, standing at the gate. He didn't look angry this time. He looked tired. The cowboy walked out to meet him. The cowgirl stayed a few steps behind.
"I just wanted to clear things up," the man said. "What happened back then, maybe I was wrong." The cowgirl crossed her arms, but her face softened slightly. The man nodded at her. "I don't want trouble. I just wanted to say that." He turned and left. The cowboy and the cowgirl stood there for a moment, watching him go. "Thank you for standing with me," she said. He replied, "You're not alone here." That night, as they sat at the table eating dinner, the cowgirl looked around the room.
"This place feels different now," she said. He smiled. "So do I." Neither of them knew what the future would bring. There were still questions, still choices to make. But as the stars came out again and the ranch settled into the quiet of night, one thing felt clear. They were no longer just two people sharing a space. They were starting to share a life. The morning light was soft as it spilled across the ranch. Dew covered the grass and the smell of wet earth filled the air. The cowboy was already up, moving quietly around the barn to check on the horses. The cowgirl followed behind him, carrying a bucket of water. The wind was calm, but the day felt full of quiet energy, as if something was about to change. They began the morning chores together. The horses needed grooming, the fences needed checking, and the cattle needed feeding. They worked side by side, speaking in short sentences, their words carrying easily across the open fields. The cowgirl moved with confidence, handling each horse as if she had been doing this her whole life, which, of course, she had. The cowboy watched her closely. He realized that she wasn't just helpful. She was someone who brought life and energy to the ranch, something he hadn't felt in years. After finishing the chores, they moved to the barn to store tools and clean up. As the cowgirl stacked the hay bales, she paused and looked at the cowboy. "I like it here," she said quietly. "It's different from anywhere I've been before." He looked at her and nodded.
It's different, yeah. Quiet, but in a good way.
She smiled softly and returned to her work. Later that afternoon, a problem arose that would put both of them to the test. One of the horses, a young stallion who had recently joined the ranch, had slipped a fence and wandered into the woods at the far edge of the property. The cowboy saw the tracks near the broken fence line and realized the horse could be in trouble. "We need to find him before he gets hurt," he said, urgency in his voice. The cowgirl grabbed her hat and tightened the straps on her boots. "Let's go," she replied. They rode out together, following the tracks into the trees. The forest was thick, the sun creating patches of light and shadow along the path. The horse had clearly been frightened and was moving fast, leaving deep hoof prints in the soft earth. They called out to him, their voices carrying across the trees, but the horse did not respond. After a while, they found him near a small stream, struggling to free his hoof from a tangle of roots. The cowgirl dismounted quickly and spoke to him in calm, steady tones. "Easy, easy now," she whispered. Slowly, carefully, she freed the horse, guiding him to a safer spot near the stream. The cowboy stood nearby, keeping watch. He was impressed by her patience and skill. "You got away with them," he said once the horse was calm again. She looked at him, brushing dirt from her hands. "You have to listen first. Understand what they need before you act." After leading the horse back to the ranch, both of them were tired but satisfied. They had faced a challenge together and come out stronger. The cowboy felt a growing respect for the cowgirl, and he realized that he trusted her completely, not just with the ranch, but with the life he had built there. That evening, as they returned home, clouds began to gather in the sky. The wind picked up and the distant sound of thunder could be heard. "We should secure the barn before it rains," he said. They hurried to close doors and windows, making sure everything was safe. The storm arrived faster than expected, with rain pouring down in heavy sheets and wind rattling the roof. Inside the house, they listened to the storm together. The sound of rain and thunder filled the rooms, and they felt a quiet sense of comfort in each other's presence. After the storm passed, the air smelled fresh and clean. The sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the wet fields. The cowboy and cowgirl stepped outside, letting the warm sunlight dry their clothes and hair. "It's beautiful after a storm," she said, taking a deep breath. He nodded. "Yeah." Makes everything feel new again. The next few days passed in a rhythm that was both familiar and comforting. They worked on the ranch, cared for the animals, and repaired fences that had been damaged by the storm. During their time together, they began to learn more about each other. The cowboy shared stories of his childhood, the early years of building the ranch, and the challenges he had faced alone. The cowgirl shared stories of her travels, the places she had seen, and the people she had met along the way. Despite the growing closeness, a challenge emerged that tested the bond they were forming. The cowgirl received word from someone from her past, a former employer, who wanted her to return and take a temporary job elsewhere. The letter was polite, but the message was clear. They needed her to work there for several weeks. She showed the letter to the cowboy, uncertainty in her eyes. "I don't know what to do," she said softly. He studied her face carefully. "Do you want to go?" he asked. She hesitated. "Part of me feels I should, but part of me doesn't want to leave." He nodded slowly, understanding the conflict she felt.
"You don't have to decide right now."
"But I want you to know you have a place here if you choose to stay." The cowgirl looked at him, the weight of her decision clear on her face. "It's not an easy choice," she admitted. Over the next few days, they spent more time together trying to enjoy the present while the decision loomed. They worked in the fields, rode horses, and cooked meals together. Each shared laugh and conversation strengthened the connection between them, though neither spoke of the future directly. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, they were sitting on the porch after finishing their chores. The sky was painted with shades of orange and pink. The cowgirl turned to the cowboy.
"I think I want to stay," she said finally, her voice quiet but firm.
The cowboy felt a warmth spread through him. "I'm glad," he said simply. They watched the sun sink below the hills in silence, comfortable and content. The decision had been made, but it was not the end. It was the beginning of something new. From that moment on, the ranch felt fuller. The house no longer echoed with emptiness. The fields no longer felt too wide. The presence of the cowgirl brought energy, warmth, and life into the cowboy's world. They continued to work side by side, facing challenges together, learning from each other, and slowly building a bond that went beyond work and chores. As the days passed, their trust in each other grew. The cowboy no longer felt the heavy loneliness that had been his constant companion. The cowgirl felt the stability she had been seeking after years of traveling. Together they found that the ranch was not just a place of work but a place of home, a home they were creating together, one day at a time. Even as challenges came and went, the unpredictable weather, the demands of the animals, and the occasional visitor from town, they faced everything together. Each obstacle was met with teamwork and understanding, and each success was shared in quiet pride. By the time another week had passed, it was clear that something had shifted. The cowboy no longer saw the cowgirl as just a helper. She was a partner, someone who belonged in the life he had built, and the cowgirl no longer saw herself as a traveler passing through. She saw the ranch, the cowboy, and the life they were beginning to share as something worth holding on to. That evening, as the stars came out, they sat on the porch and listened to the calm of the ranch at night. The wind whispered through the trees. The animals rested peacefully in the barn, and the air was filled with the quiet rhythm of life. For the first time in a long time, both of them felt completely at ease, knowing that they had faced challenges together, made choices together, and found trust and companionship in each other. The ranch, once a place of loneliness and routine, had become a place of hope, warmth, and connection. And as they looked out over the fields under the night sky, both the cowboy and the cowgirl understood that the story of the ranch, and of their lives, was no longer written by one alone. It was a story they were creating together. The morning sun rose slowly over the ranch, spreading golden light across the fields. The dew on the grass sparkled like tiny jewels, and the air was filled with the smell of earth and hay. The cowboy stepped out onto the porch, taking a deep breath. The house no longer felt empty. The soft sound of footsteps inside told him the cowgirl was already awake and moving about. For the first time in many years, he felt a sense of warmth in the house that went beyond the comfort of its walls. The day began like any other, with chores and care for the animals. They worked side by side, checking fences, feeding the cattle, and grooming the horses. The cowgirl moved easily through the tasks, confident and precise. The cowboy noticed how naturally she handled the animals, speaking softly to each horse, and moving with patience and skill. He admired her, not just for her abilities, but for her calm presence that seemed to make everything easier. After finishing the morning chores, they walked together to the fields. The cowgirl paused for a moment, looking over the land. "It feels different now," she said quietly. "How so?" the cowboy asked. She smiled softly. "It doesn't feel like just work anymore. It feels alive. And not just because of the animals, because of us, working together." He nodded slowly, understanding what she meant. The ranch, which had been a place of solitude and routine, had changed since she arrived. Her presence had brought life and movement, laughter and conversation. It had become more than a workplace, it was a home. Later that afternoon, they were repairing a fence near the far side of the property when a neighbor rode up on horseback. The man waved, smiling. "Good to see the ranch full of activity again," he called. The cowboy smiled and nodded, feeling a quiet pride. "Things have changed around here," he said. The neighbor dismounted and approached them. "I've heard about the new helper," he said to the cowboy, glancing at the cowgirl. "Seems like she's doing a good job." The cowgirl nodded politely. "I'm doing what I can." After the neighbor rode off, the cowboy and cowgirl finished the fence together. The work was harder than it looked, but they worked efficiently, passing tools back and forth, lifting heavy posts and tightening loose boards. By the time the sun was low in the sky, the fence stood strong and steady, a testament to their teamwork. As evening approached, they returned to the house. The sky was painted with colors of gold and pink, the clouds reflecting the sun's last light. They sat on the porch, catching their breath and enjoying the quiet beauty of the moment. "You know," the cowboy said after a while, "this place feels like it's finally complete." The cowgirl looked at him, curiosity in her eyes. "Complete?" "Yes," he said. "Not because of the land or the animals, but because of you. You've brought something here that I didn't even realize was missing." She smiled softly, touched by his words. "I feel the same," she admitted. "I've traveled a lot, but I've never felt settled. Not like this." The wind moved through the trees, rustling the leaves, and a soft quiet settled over the ranch. They watched as the sun disappeared behind the hills, the colors slowly fading into deep blues and purples. The next morning they continued their routine. The cowgirl prepared breakfast while the cowboy checked on the animals. They shared a simple meal, laughing at small mistakes and enjoying the easy conversation. The day passed with chores and tasks, each one an opportunity to work together and grow closer. During the afternoon they rode out to check the far fields. The horses trotted easily over the soft earth, the cowgirl riding with confidence. The cowboy glanced at her, feeling a deep appreciation for her presence. She wasn't just a helper or a companion. She was someone who belonged there, someone who made the ranch feel like home. On the ride back, they stopped near a small stream. The water flowed gently, reflecting the sunlight like tiny mirrors. The cowgirl leaned down to let the horse drink. The cowboy watched her, noticing the way her hair fell across her face, the careful way she handled the reins, the quiet strength she carried in every movement. "You know," he said, "I used to think I didn't need anyone, that the ranch and the work were enough." She looked at him, listening. "But now," he continued, "I realize that life isn't just about what you build or own. It's about who shares it with you." The cowgirl smiled, understanding completely. She reached out and rested a hand on his arm. "I'm glad I found this place," she said. As the days turned into weeks, their bond grew stronger. They shared more than work. They shared stories, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. They faced challenges together. The unpredictable weather, the occasional problem with livestock, and even disagreements that arose from different ways of doing things. Each challenge was met with patience, understanding, and cooperation, making them stronger as a team. One afternoon, they decided to clean and organize the barn together. The task was long and tiring, but they worked side by side, passing hay bales, sweeping the floor, and repairing worn boards. The cowgirl hummed softly as she worked, and the cowboy found himself smiling at the simple joy of the moment. After the barn was finished, they sat on the porch again, watching the sun dip behind the hills. The ranch was quiet, filled only with the gentle sounds of animals settling down for the night. The cowboy realized how much he had come to rely on the cowgirl, not just for help but for companionship, for laughter, and for the calm assurance she brought into his life. "I never imagined it would be like this," he said quietly. She looked at him with a soft smile. "Neither did I, but I'm glad it is." The following days passed with more work, more shared tasks, and more quiet evenings together. They planted a small garden near the house, repaired old fences, and even cleaned the house together. Each task, no matter how small, felt easier and more meaningful because they did it together. One evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of purple, the cowboy and cowgirl walked through the fields. The air was cool, carrying the scent of grass and flowers. The ranch looked peaceful, safe, and alive. The cowboy stopped and looked at the cowgirl. "You've changed this place," he said, "and you've changed me too." She smiled and took his hand. "And you've given me a place to belong," she replied. The sun set slowly, leaving the sky filled with stars. The ranch, once a place of loneliness, had become a place of warmth, love, and trust. The cowboy and cowgirl stood together, looking out over the land they had built and cared for. They understood that the life they had been creating wasn't just about work or land. It was about connection, respect, and the quiet joy of being with someone who understood. As the night deepened, they walked back to the house, side by side. The barn was quiet, the animals settled, and the wind whispered through the trees. They entered the house together, sharing a simple meal and soft conversation. The rooms no longer echoed with loneliness. They were filled with life, laughter, and the presence of someone who mattered. The cowboy realized that the story of his life had changed. The ranch, once a place of work and solitude, had become a home filled with trust, friendship, and love. The cowgirl had brought something priceless: connection and warmth. They had faced challenges, made choices, and built something together. That night, as they sat on the porch, looking at the stars, they understood that the ranch was more than land, more than work, more than success. It was a place of home. It was a place where they belonged, not just to the land, but to each other. And in that quiet, peaceful moment, both the cowboy and the cowgirl knew that the journey they had begun together had led them to something far greater than they had imagined. They had found not only companionship, but also trust, respect, and a shared life. A life that would continue to grow day by day on the ranch they had built together. The night settled over the fields, calm and gentle, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow. And for the first time in years, the cowboy felt completely at peace. The ranch was alive, the house was warm, and he was no longer alone. Together, they had created a home, a life, and a story worth living.